This episode of On the Beat is brought to you by Ingles. Shop online with Ingles Curbside Pickup. New curbside stores opening every week. Please welcome Mike Griffith.
Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat. Sorry I missed you last Monday. I was in Gainesville, Florida. Yes, Gainesville, Florida, standing in front of a room full of Florida Gators. Danny Werfel was there. Doug Johnson was there. Shane Matthews was there. Kevin Carter was there. And I was talking with the head ball coach, Steve Spurrier. Of course, you guys saw right here on Dog Nation, we streamed that first-year Coach of the Year award, Steve Spurrier, that Beamer and Heupel split, and Brock Bowers was a part of the presentation because he was the National Freshman of the Year. The only one who wasn't at the party at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill was Brock Bowers, because Brock had surgery and wasn't able to travel down there. So it just so happened I was emceeing it because I'm the chairman of the Spurrier Award. There's got to be some irony there, right? A guy that covers Georgia is the chairman for the Spurrier Award. It's just kind of how it worked out. What can I say? But Spurrier was in his glory. It was good to see him around. You know, Spurrier's 75, 76 years old. And, you know, for him to be around his players was really cool. And I just thought to myself that I hope that Kirby one day will have an opportunity to be around his players and get that sort of recognition. You know, years down the line, when we look back on the 2021 season, you know, that we're going to remember how special it was. And we're going to remember all these leaders. And we're going to remember all the good times for the Georgia Bulldogs, because it was a long time coming. And I was asked today, I did a show. I do weekly shows in different radio markets, as most of you know. On Monday mornings, I do Atlanta and Athens, and I do a show in Knoxville early Monday afternoons. Tuesday, I do Nashville and Birmingham. The afternoon show in Knoxville asked me, how does this change things for Georgia? How does a national championship change things for Georgia? And I said, you know, for me personally, and I'm not a Georgia Bulldogs fan, you guys know that. I cover the team. I've got respect for all the players and the coaches, but I've covered a lot of teams. And I'm just, you know, what happens is you kind of learn to root for individual people that you really like, that you see working hard. And man, Georgia's got a lot of those, don't they? A lot of people at Georgia have worked really hard to get here. But I said, you know, from my perspective, Georgia's been a championship contender for 5 years. I personally, I didn't need to see Georgia win a national championship to believe this was a championship program. Now, for fans, I said it was probably a big sense of relief, more than anything else. Because, look, Georgia's been great. I mean, since I've covered the program in 2018, I mean, every year it's a top 10 team. So I kind of looked at it like, yeah, probably a sense of relief. And maybe for the outside, but I believe Georgia has been a championship contender for a long time. Even when Mark Richt was here, and I looked at some of the teams he had, you know, I think I've told you guys this story that I covered the game against Hawaii in the Sugar Bowl. I freelanced it, and then the 2012 team, of course, we saw how, you know, that close that team was to making it. So I've seen Georgia with championship caliber players run a first-class program for years and years. And that's just kind of always been my impression. But I suppose for the fans, certainly, you know, now 2021 becomes a part of history. And the oil painting moments, the commemorative license plate. I love the gear, that whoever designed the gear with the dog collar around the championship. That was awesome. You know, as far as marketing and logos go, I think that looks really cool. I've always liked Georgia's uniforms. But now to see the championship stuff, I mean, this is really a neat time. But to me, it doesn't change anything for me. I've always thought that Georgia was a championship level program. But again, for the fans, and the example I used for the Tennessee fans was Rick Barnes in Tennessee. Of course, they're going to come and play in Athens in basketball tomorrow night. I said, you know, a lot of people need to see Rick Barnes get to the Final Four before they think that Rick Barnes is a good coach at Tennessee. I don't need to see that. I think Rick Barnes is a great coach. I think Tennessee's a great basketball program. But for whatever reason, they haven't jumped the shark, right? It doesn't take anything away from me. I'm not as stuck, I guess, on the end results. I kind of like the process because I document. I document it. I cover it. I value each game each week. I value every story that I tell you guys in every matchup. So to me, the championship games are awesome. And I know that there's a lot of fringe fans that jump on, people who wouldn't normally watch the team or watching them in the championship. But for a lot of you here in Dog Nation, you're here every day. I think many of you probably feel like I do, that this has been a championship program for a long time. It's always sweet to get the icing on the cake. I guess from personal experience, I think I've told you before, I was a Denver Broncos fan before I quit being a fan, right? When I outgrew it, when it just didn't matter to me if my teams won or lost. I always wanted the Broncos to win. And how many times did I have to watch Super Bowls where they didn't win? And it was like, oh my gosh, that was so devastating to watch John Elway and the Broncos lose 3 Super Bowls. But when he finally won it, I always thought it didn't make me think that John Elway was any greater player, at the Broncos were any greater franchise. It just made me realize that things finally fell their way. They had the great Terrell Davis in the backfield. And had they had Terrell Davis in John Elway's first 3 Super Bowls, they probably would have won. So sometimes factors, circumstance. I guess what I'm saying is I think Georgia's been a great program for a long time. And part of the reason I bring that up is I saw some reaction today when Kirby hired Stacy Searels. And I didn't really understand it. I understand that, everybody gets excited about every hire and you want to go out and just hire the greatest guy. But I think Searels is a proven guy. He's 56 years old. He worked at North Carolina, which Mac Brown puts together a pretty good staff, by the way. And Mac Brown hired him twice at Texas and Carolina, which tells you what kind of coach he is. If someone goes back and hires a guy a second time, Mark Richt did that with Stacy Searels. Mark Richt hired Stacy in 2007. He coached here 3 years. Then he went to Mac at Texas. And then when Mark went down to Miami, he hired Searels again. And I talked with Mark Richt today. I called Coach Richt up after the hire was made. And I said, tell me about Stacy Searels. Tell me why you hired him. And he said, well, at the time, we need a line coach. He was on Nick Saban's staff at Alabama. And, he liked the way that Stacy coached. His teams were dominant run blocking. He said he thought they played with some nasty in them, which he thought was important at that position. I remembered when I was covering Alabama, I remember Stacy Searels got interviewed there for a job, and I had really impressed Mike Dubois. I mean, this is a guy that's really well respected by his peers. And, I hear people, well, he's average. I don't know. What do you want your offensive line coach to be? I mean, it's typically not a position for somebody. It's kind of very much a bread and butter kind of position. And I looked at, excuse me. I looked at North Carolina's results. And, went down the wrong pipe. And they led the ACC in rushing each of the last 2 years. And I thought that was impressive. Now, last year, they gave up a lot of sacks because they lost 4 starters to the NFL. So, of course, they did. And they ran a very pass-heavy offense with Sam Howell. And I think he also lost some receivers, so he's probably holding the ball a little bit. But I wouldn't read too much into North Carolina's results last year. I would look at the guy's long-term resume. I think it's a solid hire. I don't necessarily know that it's a hire that you put on SportsCenter or anything, but it'll get the job done. And this is kind of what happens when you win a national championship. You're going to lose some staff members, and we've seen Kirby lose Coach Adai in the secondary. And I like the guy Fran Brown that he hired. I've heard that nothing but great things, by the way, about Fran Brown. So I don't want to call it an upgrade yet, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily a downgrade. And if you get a Stacy Searels for Matt Luke, I mean, if Matt was wanting to spend more time with his family, sometimes coaches get burned out. Sometimes people get burned out. I don't know if that's what it was, but obviously Matt's not coached anywhere. Let's see who else we look at. Dan Lanning, the Dan Lanning, losing Dan. I think having Will Muschamp, and we said it at the time that we thought that was a big get, but now it looks even bigger. So, and Cortez Hampton for BMAC, I think BMAC's probably, a guy that has proven he can recruit that Atlanta area, but I didn't hear people complaining when he got hired. I didn't hear people, well, he worked for Mark Richt. So, so I guess what I'm saying is I think that it's kind of much ado about nothing. I think that sometimes people get a little carried away. And I think the offensive line is going to be in good hands. I think the offense is going to be solid. I'm not sure about sensational. It's going to be interesting to see how much Monken goes downfield with the football. A.D. Mitchell, 1 year more experienced. Ladd McConkey, 1 year more experienced. Brock Bowers, a guy that has established himself. You wonder about some of the other receiver targets if they emerge. Kearis Jackson is back for another year. Could he have a special year? Remember, Kearis had that knee surgery last summer, and I don't know, when Kearis really felt 100 again, but I never really felt like he got fully plugged in the offense. Yeah, it's definitely a blow to lose Jermaine Burton. He was explosive. But maybe you get some boost from Eric Gilbert. We're not really sure how that's going to work out. We know he's back with the team, but is he going to be back with the team as a tight end? Is he back with the team as a receiver? How quickly does he pick things up? And then, of course, the big O, Darnell Washington. What's his role going to be? Is Kirby going to be able to keep him? I look in the backfield, and I keep hearing great things about Kenny McIntosh. Hearing Kenny McIntosh having a great offseason. You guys know what Kendall Milton can do. You've seen him run over some people before. So I expect those two guys, Kenny and Kendall, to have really big years. I know everybody's high on the freshman, and he can wait, he can bench press a lot and all that, but being a running back in the SEC there's more to it. And in Georgia's offense, there's a lot of reads and there's a lot of calls. And I don't know how quickly he's going to be able to contribute. That's something to watch for. Certainly another talent back there. But I think the offense, I guess what I'm saying is the Stacey Searles hire and the BMAC hire, a couple guys from the Mark Richt era. When I think back to Coach Richt's offenses, they were pretty good. They were really good at times and more prolific than what I saw to Georgia last year, to be frank with you. So I think the offensive coaches are fine. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think any of these coaching hires are an issue for Kirby. I think he's done a nice job reloading, and I think this is something you've got to get used to if Georgia stays on top, which I expect him to. You look at the schedule next year, and I'd be shocked if Georgia wasn't back in the SEC championship game. And maybe they find their mojo. Maybe they find their rhythm. Maybe they make another run for the national title. But at the very least, I think we can say Georgia will win the East and play for the SEC championship. And I don't think who they hired at offensive line coach would really make much of a difference either way, to be honest with you. I just don't see that. I think you got to get somebody that knows how to coach these guys up at this level, that's been at this level, that understands SEC competition. And Stacey Searles is that guy. So I will say this, reflecting back on Gainesville, because I saw some comments about being down there. There's a lot of questions about Billy Napier. He brings in a Nick Saban style of approach in terms of the number of bodies. They're hiring a lot of bodies, a lot of analysts to kind of circle the wagons and really attack things. And talking with Coach Spurrier, I think it's kind of a little bit of a wait and see. Obviously he wants to see his alma mater do well. I was a little surprised Napier didn't show up, quite frankly, at the banquet to see. Shane Beamer was there and Heupel, as I said, and watching Coach Spurrier, poke some fun at those schools, because it's just what he does. It's not in a mean-spirited way. It's just kind of what Coach Spurrier does. And he had a little fun with Heupel and Beamer, and those guys rolled with it. There are a couple of young coaches that have respect for him. Of course, Beamer worked for Spurrier as a graduate assistant, also worked here at Georgia for Kirby. And you guys probably saw the show I did with Shane Beamer last spring when, nobody else wanted to interview him. He just got hired. It was the craziest thing. And we had him on Dog Nation for 45 minutes last spring. And did an interview with Shane, and he talked a lot about the culture that Kirby built here, the secret sauce, and a lot of the things that he learned from Kirby that he planned to institute over there at South Carolina. And I think a lot of Georgia fans like to see Shane's success because he was a part of a special run here in 2017. And a lot of people do respect his dad, the legendary Frank Beamer. And then, of course, Josh Heupel, who came in the league last year and may have a Heisman Trophy contender at quarterback, and Hendon Hooker. A very exciting offense. We saw them actually lead Georgia for a quarter, which nowadays, you lead Georgia for a quarter. That's pretty dadgum good if you lead them at all. But we got to see Tennessee do some things, and Kirby got his first taste of that offense that they run. That's going to be a really interesting game next year. They lost their second leading receiver and their running back. So how does Tennessee reload? So I guess my takeaway though from just hearing a little bit about Napier, talking with Heupel, talking with Beamer, talking with some other people about each one of those programs, I think Tennessee and South Carolina next year, in Kentucky, I think those schools are every bit the threat Florida is, because I think Florida is going through a culture change right now. And I think it's going to take Napier a while to get that program where he wants it his way. Because, you saw Jeremy Pruitt when he took over Tennessee. He was trying to change the culture, and it just took some time. And I don't know that Jeremy ever really got – well, they were on the verge of getting there. What did they win? 8 in a row? And then Georgia went in there in 2020 and knocked him upside down, and Jeremy went off on the locker room and kind of lost his team after that game. So thought it was pretty interesting to be around those other schools last week. So sorry I missed you guys, but it was time well spent for a really cool first-year award. And I guess we're going to wait and see how things work out for Georgia. And I don't think we're going to be having a Georgia first-year coach anytime soon. So we'll have some fun with that. The second half of tonight's show, I want to talk to you about the NFL Combine, because I'll be heading up there this week to cover the Georgia players. There's going to be 14 different guys are going to be there next week. So that's going to be pretty interesting to cover those guys, this week. And I'm going to break them down one by one. I want to look through some of your comments here, see what we got going here the first half of things. What do we got? Any questions for my eyebrow? Do I have an eyebrow scaring you? I'm sorry. How are my eyebrows? Is there a problem? They should be okay. No, everybody's fine here. Might have been the camera angle. I don't know. Everything's normal. I don't shave them. I don't do anything crazy to them. What other questions do we got here? No questions for the first half of the show? Are we already over with the first half of the show? Nobody's got any questions here? Don't see it. All right. Okay. Well, listen, let's take our first half break. When I come back, we're going to talk a lot more about the NFL Combine, and we'll have some fun. I'm going to break down guys that I think are first-round picks, and then some guys that I think are the second-day picks, second and third round, and then some guys that maybe slide down to rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I'll give you an idea what I think each guy needs to do down there at the NFL Combine. There's certain times when you really got to come through. There's certain times when you need to be at your best. And you guys know that for us, during the pandemic, when we were counting on Ingles, certainly Ingles was at its best serving us. And tonight, we take a moment to recognize our sponsor, Ingles.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back. With open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand. Community strong.
Well, welcome back to the show. Mike Griffith here, and appreciate you guys being here tonight. Hope everybody's having a great week, a great weekend. I see Kevin Cook had a question about the Kenny and Kendall show again. Well, we were hoping to have one more episode. I know we've talked about it, and the guys are interested. We'll see if we can pull that together. You never know how those things go. So what other questions do we have here? What do we have? Cowboys will get Nakobe Dean. Look, people are already talking about what teams they want to get players. That is part of the fun, is to see where these players go. And and I know in past years, former Georgia players, they typically don't have the following once they leave Georgia. But from my experience, when players win a national championship, I've seen fan bases just kind of go all in on them, right? And I think that 2021 Georgia team is always going to be really special to the Bulldogs fans, to the extent that I do believe they're going to follow them more closely in the NFL than maybe they've followed former players before. Certainly Matt Stafford winning a Super Bowl this year. I know there's a lot of Rams fans now in the Dog Nation. DeAndre Swift doing some dynamic things with the Lions. People like Nick Chubb as well. These are things that there's going to be even more Bulldogs in the NFL. I mean, you're looking at least 12 or 13 guys getting picked, and I still think that Georgia can set a record with 15. Kirby says he doesn't think so. He doesn't think they can get 15. He said, no way. But I think they could get 14 or 15. So I'm going to start out with the first-round guys, and I think all of you guys know the names here. Jordan Davis, Trevon Walker, Nakobe Dean, and Devontae Wyatt. Devontae Wyatt moved into the first-round conversation with his performance down there at the Senior Bowl. And I heard a lot of people when James Cook skipped it, he's got enough film. Listen, everybody's got enough film. It's, do you want to go and compete? And that's the way a lot of these NFL teams look at it. Do you want to compete? Do you want to go head-to-head? And it does tell you something about a guy. Now, I think James would have actually made himself a lot of money down there by showing everybody what he could do in person, instead of letting Alabama's Brian Robinson, get all the attention. But for whatever reason, his agent didn't go that direction. Okay. The reason they didn't is because they were working out for the combine. And now it's time for all these guys, their whole entire life's work gets funneled into this event. This is one of the final events for them to raise their draft stock or lower it if they don't run a good number. We've seen that happen with Georgia guys a few years ago. We saw some guys run some slow numbers. Elijah Holyfield hurt himself with a 4.8 plus, and Isaac Nauta didn't run a good number that particular year. Riley Ridley did not run a good number. And these are things that cost these guys in the draft. The first round guys, though, Trevon Walker, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Devontae Wyatt. Trevon Walker, I think a lot of people are anticipating that he's going to be one of the workout wonders. And I actually saw Daniel Jeremiah project him in the top 5. I mean, I don't know if I can see that. That seems like a bit much. As athletic and as much upside as Trevon has, I just don't know that I could see him in the top 5, maybe the top 15. Jordan Davis, I'll be really interested to see what body does Jordan Davis show up with. Last year he played between 340 and 355, and Kirby was always on him to lose weight. And so did he lose the weight, and how much did he lose, and how is Jordan Davis going to run? I think this is going to have a lot to do with his NFL draft stock. Because I think right now a lot of teams see him as just a guy that takes up space. He doesn't really get in there and disrupt like a Jalen Carter or even a Devontae Wyatt. So Jordan Davis is going to be a very interesting guy to see this week. See where his body's at. What does he weigh in at? How does he run? We know he's got good feet. Nakobe Dean. Nakobe, a guy who has incredible film. We watched him all year. He's an incredible playmaker. But how tall is Nakobe, and will that hurt him that he's not 6'2" and he's 6 foot? With some teams, probably. Other teams, not so much. Everybody has their likes and dislikes. Devontae Wyatt, a lot of steam coming out of the Senior Bowl. Can he maintain and show that he's just as athletic as any other defensive lineman at the combine? If so, I think he will lock it in the first round. Now, these are the guys to me with a lot of opportunity for mobility. Maybe some of them could slip into the first round. Some of them could fall out of the second or the third round. You already heard me talk about James Cook. George Pickens. I want to see what George does. Now, George was not necessarily a speed demon here, but on the tracking methods, when they look at the miles per hour, he was pretty fast. Now, I don't know what he's going to run on a straight line and on a stopwatch, but George is one of those guys that had the kind of that burst, that closing speed at the end of the catch when he needed it. So I do think his numbers matter. Certainly his physical is going to matter. I think teams are going to interview George and they're going to draw some conclusions on whether they like him or not as a person. I think this is a really, really big event for George. I think there's still an opportunity, an outside shot for George to move into the first round. There's also a chance that George could really fall, and it just depends on how he works out. I don't think he falls any lower than the third round, but I think, again, all it takes is one team to like you. Lewis Cine is a guy that's kind of been under the radar. He wasn't a senior, so he couldn't play in an all-star game. A lot of people think Lewis is a tweener, a little bit bigger and slower than some of the safeties than you'd like, but a little bit smaller and faster than some of the linebackers. I look at Lewis as kind of one of these players of today, though. I mean, I think you're looking for these tweener guys because you got to find guys that can cover guys like Brock Bowers. Who do you have out there that's big enough to handle him, but fast enough to run with him? That's a guy like Lewis Cine, because you're seeing a lot of these mismatched, bigger receiver guys. And I like Lewis. He's also really good in run support. And perhaps more than anything else, Lewis is incredibly, incredibly intelligent guy. I mean, this is a guy with a football IQ through the roof. Quay Walker, I'm not sure what Quay is going to be able to do yet. Remember, Quay pulled out of the Senior Bowl with injury. Is he going to be recovered enough to work out at the combine? I do not know that. Don't forget, George's pro day is March 16th. So if Quay is not able to go or is limited, then I think the hope would probably be that he would try to work out at Georgia. I like Quay Walker a lot. I like his size. I think he hits really hard. He's a wholesome tackler. When he hits you, you just hear that thud. You can just feel the body parts of the other guy compressing. I mean, and he was just so good in the open field last year. I thought he made a huge jump from 2020 to 2021. I thought Quay improved as much as anybody. Channing Tindall, a guy that really emerged, right? You saw that burst from Channing, those pursuit angles. I mean, the NFL teams love that. They just love that. I don't know enough about the other corners of Channing's game, but you better believe there's going to be some teams going to school on him. He could be a fast riser that nobody's talking about. He could be kind of one of those sneaky picks that sneaks up into the second round, and you go, wow, where'd that guy come from? And you're like, well, it's Georgia. They got a ton of good guys. Darian Kendrick was a guy whose stock at one point was in the first round for some. I think that slipped a little bit. I don't know that Darian had the best Senior Bowl, but he was down there competing. He told me he didn't feel like he had a good first day there. I like Darian's story. Remember at the beginning of the show when I said, well, I'm not a Georgia fan, right? And beat writers aren't. You have to understand that for me to do my job properly, I have to remove myself emotionally from the results of the game. I can't be I'm mad the Dogs lost, so I'm just going to write a bunch of bad stuff. No, you can't look at it like that, right? You got to look at every game into itself. You got to assess it. And, you get paid the same either way, whether they win or lose. Certainly it's a lot easier and a lot more fun to cover a winning team like this. But I told you, though, that you end up rooting for people. You find stories you like. And Darian Kendrick's story, it's hard not to really appreciate. The kid went through a lot of adversity at Clemson last spring. I think you remember the stories. He was dismissed from the program, and Georgia gave him a second chance. And Kirby had to get it right? Darian had to get it right with Kirby. And he did, right? He stayed between the lines. He was a huge contributor to the national championship team. I don't know if they win a national championship without Darian Kendrick. And you could say that about a lot of guys. I mean, Georgia had a lot of pieces this year, a lot of very important pieces that if you take one out, I'm not so sure that everything stays the same. And I thought Darian was one of those. So we'll see where Darian goes. I hope Darian can stay on day 2. I hope he's a second or third round pick. I think there's a chance he could slip to the 4th. He needs a good combine. So when I talk about the first round, Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Devontae Wyatt. When I look at the second round, Pickens, Cine, I like Quay Walker. I don't know if he'll go that high. I think Channing could slide in there. Cook, second, third round, if James takes care of business in the 40. Get into rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7 now. Jamari Salyer and Justin Schaefer could move up into rounds 2 or 3. It really depends on the run at that position. How fast are the guys at their line group getting picked ahead of them? And what are the needs for these teams, right? So I think these are guys that have third-round talent. I'm just not sure about where they stack up with other offensive linemen. And Zamir White, Zamir could get into that third round if he's able to run a really good number. But, both him and James ran 40 times over 4.5 last summer at the Georgia Combine. So both of those guys need good days. And then Jake Camarda will be there. And I think that Jake is going to get drafted. Punters don't often get drafted. But I think Jake Camarda was very special. And I think he was one of the hidden heroes to the national championship season when you think about how many times he flipped the field, right? Georgia's punting from their own 20 and the other team takes over from their own 20. I mean, it was pretty crazy to see how often Jake came up clutch. And punter is one of those positions you don't really notice unless they screw up. And I thought Jake Camarda was tremendously consistent. I thought he was one of the big factors for a team that really won the national championship with their defense last year. And then now John Fitzpatrick is not going to be there. But I think he's on everybody's radar. And the reason he's not there is because of a foot injury. He played all season with a bad foot. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that put the team first. Fitz knew he had a foot that needed surgery, and he played all year long because he wanted to help his team win a title, even though he knew it could hurt him on the back end in the evaluation part of the season. So this is a really unselfish guy. I think he's got great film, though. I think if you put on the Michigan game and you watch what he did against those high-profile Michigan defensive ends, really just watch the whole SEC season. And we don't talk a lot about it. You don't see highlights of great tight end blocks, but I thought John Fitzpatrick was consistent all year. I saw someone ask me if Adam Anderson would be there. The answer is no. He didn't get a combine invite. And I'm still not sure if George is going to allow him to work out at their pro day. But those of you that have kept up with Adam's case, and he is obviously no longer a part of the Georgia program, and he faces rape charges from 2 different women, has not yet been indicted. He's kind of in limbo, has to kind of wait for the DA to indict or not. In the meantime, he can work out. I think his attorney said that he can work out in Athens, and if he's not allowed to work out with the team in the Georgia football building, that they would have an alternate site in Athens where the scouts could go see him. So that's where Adam Anderson is at with that. Before I wrap things up, I guess I'd say a few things about spring sports getting started. The baseball team is off to a great start. They've got this week, they play Georgia Tech. Pretty interesting, a 3-game series that starts in Atlanta on Friday, maybe, and then Athens, and then Lawrenceville Sunday. So that's an interesting way that Georgia and Georgia Tech are splitting. Remember, Georgia Tech pretty much kept Georgia baseball out of the NCAA tournament last year. Those 2 losses to the Jackets were really costly. Georgia Tech got into the NCAA tournament last year ahead of Georgia, even though Georgia had a better RPI. And I think it came back to that series. So you better believe that Scott Strickland and the Bulldogs, the Diamond Dogs, are going to really be going after the Jackets there. That's an interesting baseball series. You don't normally get important series that early in the season, the SEC part of the season, still a few weeks off. But that's something you're going to want to keep an eye on this week. Softball, they had a girl pitch a perfect game Friday night. Granted, the competition wasn't the greatest, but the perfect game is a perfect game. And Georgia softball needs pitching. They need pitching depth. If they're going to get back to the Women's College World Series, they got a brand new coach. They're both programs, baseball and softball, ranked number 15 in the country. So both programs had perfect weekends. Both programs striving to get in the top 10. Neither one among the most elite in the SEC. But I think knocking on the door, trying to get there. Strickland, I think this is year 9 for him. And then again, we talked about you had a first-year coach in softball. Basketball teams had some tough times. You've seen that. I think I've said it on this program. There was some pretty, there's a lot of blogs and fan stuff out there on the internet, and people that, they just, I don't know, they just feel like making things up or what, but just some really bad reporting went down. To the point where Georgia had to issue a release and say this and this is wrong. This incident involving 2 coaches was handled correctly. But when people want a coach fired, they'll go to great extremes and great extents. And I don't know whether or not Tom Crean's going to get fired or not. I do know this. If you're going to fire Tom Crean, I want to know who you're going to bring in, who's built a program before like he did at Indiana, right? I don't think you can hire somebody that's never been a head coach. Not if you want to make, if you want to just change the flavor, that's fine. But if you truly want to make a difference in Georgia basketball, then you need to make a really, really big hire, and you need to put a lot of resources into it so that you're on a level playing field with the Texas A&Ms, with the Kentuckys, with the Arkansas, with the Alabamas, with the Floridas, and you're not there, right? So to me, you just keep changing coaches and the results stay the same unless you do something different, unless you invest into the program. We saw with football. Football needed facilities. One of the things Kirby did to take the next step was get those facilities built to finally catch up and be on a level playing field. For years and years and years, Georgia was behind in facility. Well, in basketball, they're behind. I don't think it's a coaching issue. I really don't. I think it's a culture issue. Georgia's got one basketball regular season title in school history. In school history. How many coaches have you had come through here? Right? At some point, you got to look inward and say, wait a minute, what aren't we doing that everybody else is doing? Well, two things. One, as I said, investing in your program and giving your coaches the same staff, analysts, personnel, graphic designers, right? Money for recruits as the teams you're trying to beat. And two, here's the other thing Georgia did. They didn't hire a coach that cheated, right? And you laugh about it, but take a look at the top of the SEC. How many of these programs had an NCAA or FBI investigation in the last 5 years? Take a look at that. FBI, NCAA, didn't happen at Georgia, right? That was not what Crean was going to do. That was why they hired. Look, we're going to try to do this right. Doing it the right way ain't working. Got news for you. Who's doing it the right way that's winning? Tell me that. Tell me that. Is it Kansas? Is it? No, I don't think so. How about Duke? Huh? No, Zion Williamson. North Carolina? We found out what was going on there. Syracuse? No, take a look around. So if you're going to make a change in basketball, don't make a change just to make a change. That's what I would say. Don't make a change just to make a change. If you're going to make a change, then don't hire somebody that's never been a head coach. Because how in the world are you going to try to build a program at Georgia with the SEC where it's at right now? This isn't the SEC of 5 and 7 years ago where half the teams were crappy. You got 4 teams in the top 17 here. All right. This is a shark tank. And if you want to swim with the sharks, either go out and get you a shark and be willing to take your chances, although I don't really see anybody getting in too much trouble with compliance. So I don't know really how much of a chance it is. Or start putting more money into the program and get serious about it. But Georgia's just never done that. They've just never really done it. They've never, people, what do you like? NIL deals. Where's the NIL deals? Where are they at? All these Georgia, we want to play. Okay, well, you got players. You got Atlanta. Where's your Porsche dealership? Because in Kentucky, they're giving kids Porsches. What are you offering them here? What are they getting? Well, you get free education. Well, that's not enough anymore. All right, let's look at what's happening at LSU. Let's look at what happened at Auburn. Let's look at Arkansas. All right, let's look at Kentucky. You're trying to, Texas saying, let's look at the schools you're competing with and ask yourself, is it worth it to you? Right? Is it worth it to you? You just want to complain and, just change coaches. That'll fix everything. No, it won't. Not unless you change the culture and the resources in the program. If you want to get serious about it, get serious about it. Otherwise, it's just white noise to me. Just people complaining. Change the coach. Easy, lazy way to say it. Not that simple. Not about coaching. The fact that these guys are still playing hard amazes me. They're just not as good. They're not as big. They're not as strong. They're not as deep. But they're playing everybody hard. They're still shooting good free throws. They're practicing. They're doing everything they can, right? Just not good enough. Not enough players. So that's my take on men's basketball. Women's basketball, let's see what happens with Joni this year. I think they go into the SEC tournament this week as a number 6 seed. I really thought this could be a special year when Jen Stacey came back. I don't know what's really happened. They got a little momentum going in, couple wins. I'm going to keep my eye on the women's team in Nashville this week, see if they can catch fire. Remember last postseason, they got hot, made a nice little run. Like what's happening with that program. But they're missing something here at the end of the year. So we'll take a look around the basketball scene. We'll see what happens for basketball. We'll see what happens at the combine. Spring football's coming up. You should probably see Stetson Bennett commercial soon. I saw he signed with Everett Sports Management. Everett is the preeminent NIL agent out there. JT Daniels is still a client, and so is Grayson Lambert at Coastal Carolina. So those are the only 3 coaches the only 3 quarterbacks that Everett Sports Management has signed. So keep an eye on that, and that's going to be pretty interesting. Let's take a look and see what other questions we have right here. A lively comment section here, folks. Always enjoy the feedback. Certainly, thank you guys. Hugh Nash, don't just change just to change. Go out and hire the dirtiest guy out there. Hugh, that's not exactly what I said. But if you hire Rick Pitino, but here's the question. Who wants to come? If you're not going to spend money and you don't have boosters or a community that's going to pay for players, who thinks they're going to come here and win? That's done it before. There's a lot of assistant coaches say, give me my first chance. Georgia should not be a first chance job. It just shouldn't. It shouldn't be somebody's first head coaching job. It shouldn't. It's an SEC school. This is SEC basketball has kind of become a big thing. I mean, take a look. I mean, Ben Howland at Mississippi State is struggling over there, right? And Frank Martin, I mean, goodness gracious, he's hanging on for dear life. This is a tough. Buzz Williams comes in, one of the most promising, hottest candidates, and he's at A&M. What's he done? This is a tough league to win in, right? It's not what it once was. And it takes everything. It takes coaching. It takes resources. It takes commitments. Very competitive in basketball. I see Greg Childers wanted to hire Rick Pitino before Tom Crean. Pretty fun here. Tennille with some nice comments. I see we've got an Alabama fan in here. Alabama fans, the loyalty, it's when I covered the Crimson Tide in the 90s, Alabama is like, it's a birthright. When they're born a Bama fan, they just believe they're supposed to win because it's just always been that way in football. Now, basketball is kind of an acquired taste. Got a little taste of success last year. Not quite sure what to do with it now. They're struggling a little bit. But I'll tell you, Bama has invested heavily in basketball. Look at Bob saying, you got a new state Coliseum. What more needs to be done? It's not just the Coliseum. It's the number of personnel that you have working for you. It's the amount of money that's out there for the players when they come to the school. It's more than just, boy, you've got a pretty basketball arena, right? You've got to have the infrastructure and a basketball community. When Tom Crean went to Indiana, the place was, it had all been burned down. They were down to 2 or 3 or 4 scholarship players. They were awful. They were the dregs of the league. Once proud Indiana. And Crean had to build Indiana back up, right? A program that had just been hit with NCAA, and he rebuilt them into Big Ten champions. I witnessed it. I watched it. I covered Michigan State when Indiana was rolling, and they were rolling. Man, they were good. He can coach now. When he got the players, he can coach. But I don't think Georgia has ever shown that culture where there's a community out there that's going to go beyond the head coach like they do for football. It's a football school. This is what we mean when we say football school. Now, how have these other coaches gotten it done at schools like this? Well, Google their names and take a look at some of the questions that people have asked about their rebuilding process. And I just don't think that Georgia has wanted to go down that road. We'll see what happens. Nothing's imminent, in my opinion. Josh Brooks, one of the things Josh told us when he took the job is the first thing that Georgia does when they assess their coaches is they look inward and they say, are we giving this coach everything he needs to compete for championships? Right? And I don't know how you would answer that question, but I know how I would answer that question. And we'll probably talk more about it next week. But this will wrap it up for tonight. I'm going to head out, and I got to do a story for the morning. And then we'll head up to Indianapolis for the Combine. You can see me on the Paul Feinbaum Show on Thursday night. I believe I'll be on there on the SEC Network. Usually do the show with Brandon. Dog Nation Daily is usually a Wednesday appearance. Hopefully we'll be able to pull that off this week. I know there's some interviews going on at the Combine. Tomorrow night's Tuesday night, and that means Connor in coverage. I know you've been getting a lot of doses of Connor. He puts a lot into his shows. I think he does a really nice job, puts a lot of information out there, uses a lot of graphics, so it's really easy to understand and follow what he's doing a really nice job with that. Centel's back this week. So Wednesday night, you got Centel's Intel via Before the Hedges. That's that show. Don't know that if we'll do a cover 4 this week. If not this week, probably the following week. Can't really say. That's kind of up in the air. But every day at 10, or you've got Dog Nation Daily with Brandon Adams and the producer, Michael Carvel. And Michael was the producer tonight. And thank you for the production, Michael. And I appreciate all you guys coming on there, even though you made me paranoid about my eyebrow, which I'm looking at it and I still don't see what's so weird about it. But hey, the way lighting hits stuff, I guess it would looking weird. I'm not sure. I'll have to do a much closer examination and after the show and take a look at that. Hey, listen, everybody, have a great week. Enjoy your week. Enjoy following us on dognation.com. And I'll be back. Talk to you later this week.